Members of the FDA Advisory Committee are angry and disappointed that the FDA and Moderna held back data from them when they were making the decision as to whether they should authorize the BA4, BA5 booster COVID vaccine that is now being done as a booster. The data that was held back was looking at whether the vaccine, compared to the older version of the vaccine as a booster, was effective. Turns out that it may not have been. Now, as a result, the U.S. taxpayers are on the bill for $5 billion for this new booster vaccine that may actually not be any better. So let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. So hopefully by now you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. We are available on all social media platforms. We are having a great time over on TikTok, where I'm putting really instant news out there on a regular basis. So catch me over there if you want to catch like the latest and greatest of what I'm thinking about. Now, the FDA, as you may know, before every vaccine, before they got the emergency authorization, that there's this advisory committee that gets together and they are presented information, presented data from the FDA and from the drug companies in order to make a decision whether they would recommend to the FDA whether the vaccine should have been authorized or not. Okay. And what they did, the data that was mostly presented to them was given that showed that the antibody levels were higher against the Omicron variants when they were given this new BA4, BA5 booster. But what was held back? Now, what they did, the study that was put forth, that was held back, and there was 814 subjects, and they were comparing, they broke it down approximately in half, and half of the people were given a booster. So they had originally had the primary series, but they were given a booster as the original vaccine, the same one. And then the other half were given the BA4, BA5 new bivalent booster. But the information that they were withheld was actually looking at who got sick from COVID afterwards. Okay, now here are the findings. For all people of this 814 group, they found that people who got the original vaccine as a booster, that there was 2.4% people then went on to catch COVID, got infected. People who got the new bivalent vaccine, it was 2.5%. Now, that's approximately the same. So we're going to say, even though the number is a little higher, we'll call that a wash. But certainly not better, certainly not a significant improvement why one would be exposed to a new drug. Now, even more so, people who never had evidence of COVID before, so this was several hundred people, and this is by doing nucleocapsid antibodies or whether they had a positive test before, people who had never been infected before, 3.2% of them got COVID when they received the new version of it, and 1.9% got it if they got the old version of the booster. So this vaccine, this new vaccine that was put forth to everybody and everybody was told out to go out and get, was 60% worse for people who had never had COVID before. How about that? Now, lack of transparency. The advisors, as I said, they were given this report. They were not given all of the information. 48 million Americans have gotten this new booster vaccine. Now, this information as they came out, some of the physicians that were on this advisory panel. Now, I'm going to quote some of these things that they said. Now, in doctor speak, this is as pissed off as you'll hear a doctor ever be when they're saying something against the CDC or against drug companies. But I want to make sure that I get these quotes right, so let me explain. Now, Dr. Paul Offit, who is the head of vaccines at CHOP Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, who is a head pediatrician, certainly a vaccine advocate, said, and he was actually one of the few people who voted against the bivalent vaccine, even without knowing this data. But he said, I was angry to find out that there was data that was relevant to our decision that we didn't get to see. Decisions that are made for the public have to be made based on all available information, not just some information, but all information. Dr. Eric Rubin, another member, said, we are not a group of children. We understand how to interpret these results. Dr. Anthony Monto, who was the acting chair of this group, said, there should always be transparency. This data should not have been dismissed. Dr. Harry Bernstein, another member, said, I was angry to find out that there was data that was relevant to our decision that I didn't get to see. Angry because they should trust us to make the decisions based on all the data. These agencies, whether it's the FDA or the CDC, can't make that decision for us. That's the point of having an independent advisory committee. They then all went on to say, the pandemic has demonstrated the extent of vaccine hesitancy in the U.S., and it would be reassuring to the public if all data, not just some, were discussed during the advisory meetings. Wow. Now, let's go back a couple years. And if you've been following this channel or you saw originally, I was one of the people who was chosen to present to this very committee when the vaccines were being authorized. I presented several times then. What was the thing that I first presented about? The concern about hesitancy that would develop, especially if there wasn't transparency, and urging the committee, urging the FDA, urging the CDC to make sure that there is 100% daylight, 100% transparency when presenting the data, or they're going to lose people. Gee, look what's happened. And not just from this, but obviously from other stuff that's come out too. Now, let me give you a little timeline of what happened at that point. Now, in June of 2022, that's when the advisory committee voted 19-2 to recommend that the authorization is given by the FDA to the CDC. And so in July, then the tax bill that we are all paying for, the bill to Pfizer was $3.2 billion. To Moderna, it was $1.7 billion. It has now been 6 months since we have had this emergency authorization. Moderna still has not released data on 3,000 subjects when they compared the original vaccine to the new bivalent booster. 6 months later, why aren't they releasing this information? Do they know something? I wonder. Now, Pfizer even more so. They said it still doesn't have any data collected comparing this. Amazing. So now Dr. Paul Offit has gone on record and said the following. This was not acceptable. I understand we're in the middle of a pandemic. I understand we're building the plane while it's still in the air. But you can't do this. It did shake my faith. It shook my faith in how these decisions were being made. And now, on January 26th of 2023, these advisors are set to meet again to discuss the future about COVID vaccines. Might be a good time to be a fly on the wall for that one. I'll be very interested to see how that goes. So my concluding thoughts. It is pathetic that data was withheld from this advisory committee who is supposed to advise to tell us what to do. The public should have been given all of this information, right? Informed consent means that we should have all of the data available so that we individually can weigh the potential benefits versus the potential risks before we make a decision on what to do from a healthcare, from a medical perspective. By the way, as a little aside, the FDA just announced that there is actually a safety concern that was just flagged about seniors getting strokes following the Pfizer bivalent booster. So let's see where that goes. But anyways, to your health, and have a good day.
If you like what you've been seeing, please hit the subscribe button.